Alright folks, tonight we're taking a detour into the grimy, grueling and gloriously gross world of the Middle Ages. This isn't your typical knight in shining armour tale. No, this is the gritty reality, a time of plagues, punishment and porridge that smells like regret. Settle in. Maybe turn on a white noise machine if you're feeling fancy, because your journey back to the year 1325 starts now. Good news, you're alive. Bad news, so are the fleas. You wake up on a lumpy straw mattress, more accurately a decomposing pile of hay and insects that smells faintly like a goat's armpit. Memory foam? Try barn floor foam. And that heavy wool blanket you've been curled under? It's less a blanket and more a crusty relic of last winter's sweat and sorrow. The sound of distant bells jerks you awake. That's not an alarm clock. It's the church summoning the village. It's loud, relentless, and somehow worse than your current back pain. You're 22 years old, which in medieval terms puts you somewhere between distinguished elder and death's intern. You share your one-room wooden shack, and I use room generously, with your entire family, a couple of chickens, and enough bugs to qualify as a minor plague. There are no windows, no walls separating anything, and definitely no privacy. It's open-concept peasant living, complete with eau de goat, stale mead, and something suspiciously mouldy in the corner. Stretching in the morning sounds like a good idea, until your knees crack like dry twigs and your back protests with the elegance of a collapsing barn. The floor beneath you is either soggy from rain leaking through the thatched roof or crusted with chicken droppings. Either way, you've just stepped into medieval nature's welcome mat. Congratulations. It's morning in 1325 and you're not alone. Parasites, relatives, rodents, and at least one guy who claims to be your cousin are sharing the space. And the day is just getting started. So you've dragged yourself out of your medieval bug pile. Nice work. But now your stomach's doing somersaults and, well, nature isn't calling. It's yelling through a megaphone. Time for a trip to the bathroom, except, spoiler, that word hasn't been invented yet. There's no porcelain throne, no scented candles, and definitely no toilet paper. You're not even getting a wooden seat. What you're working with is either a bucket behind the house or an alley behind that bucket, if you're lucky. But today, you're not lucky. That bucket, already full. Thanks, Uncle Wulfric. Those turnips were a mistake. What happens next is a medieval ritual that doubles as a public hazard. You squat, suffer, and then, here's the pièce de résistance. You hurl it into the street. No, really, right into the road. There's a customary shout of garde-loup, medieval French for duck and pray. But nobody moves fast enough, and now it's just part of the town's open-air sewer system. And let's talk about that street. It's a greatest hits collection of waste. Human, animal, and things you wouldn't poke with a stick even if paid in bread. It flows, it bubbles, it stinks. If your town has a public latrine, congratulations. It's a glorified outhouse where you sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers, making awkward eye contact while you pretend to enjoy the drafty ambience. Toilet paper? Adorable idea. You'll be using straw, moss, or a scrap of cloth that's already seen too much. If you're wealthy, maybe a bit of wool. If you're practical, nothing. Just air and regret. Shaking hands hasn't caught on for a reason. And if you're living in a castle, you're not exactly royalty when it comes to hygiene. You might have access to a guard-robe, a hole in the stone wall that drops your waist directly into the moat. Great. Until an invader uses it as a medieval backdoor entrance. Yes, they really climbed in that way. Bottom line, going to the bathroom in the 1300s is cold, unsanitary, and occasionally life-threatening. One wrong step and you're swimming in human leftovers, and don't even think about brushing your teeth yet. We'll get there. You survived the medieval bathroom lottery. That alone deserves applause. Maybe a reward, a comforting breakfast, not a chance. Welcome to your morning meal, medieval edition. Less fuel for the day, more gritty sorrow in a bowl. You shuffle to the fire, or what's left of last night's embers, and you're greeted with a wooden bowl full of something that looks like it lost a fight with a compost heap. That, my friend, is pottage. It's not so much a recipe as it is a long-running experiment in despair. It's been simmering for days, weeks even, with new ingredients just dumped in on top of whatever's still bubbling at the bottom. Grains, root vegetables, the occasional bean if you're living large. Mostly it's grey, gooey and suspiciously chewy. On the side you get a slab of bread so hard it could double as a weapon. Made from barley or rye, never wheat, that's rich people stuff, and often enhanced with sawdust, crushed bark or ground acorns. This bread doesn't slice, it resists. What about something to drink? Maybe orange juice, fresh milk, a nice herbal tea? Nope. You're knocking back a mug of flat, warm, low-alcohol beer, and it's not even noon. Why? Because the water will kill you. Literally. It's full of everything from parasites to poultry runoff. Small beer, a diluted, barely bubbly brew, is safer. Even toddlers drink it. It doesn't taste good, but at least it's not full of cholera. Meat? Cheese? You wish. That's reserved for feast days, weddings and miracles. Most peasants see meat maybe 5 times a year, and usually only when something dies unexpectedly. Fruit? Only if it hasn't fermented in the sun yet. And spices? A single pinch of pepper costs more than your family's annual income. Salt is locked away like a precious metal. You might get a flake or two if you're lucky, or if someone drops some and you're fast enough to snatch it. So, there you are. Nibbling on a brick of barley bark bread, sipping sad beer, and trying to ignore the rat that probably taste-tested your pottage last night. This isn't breakfast. It's a medieval endurance test. And now that you've had your sad spoonful of nutritional regret, it's time to get dressed. That's right. We're just getting started. You've choked down your breakfast of boot-flavoured porridge and bargain bin beer. Now it's time to get dressed, which sounds like a refreshing change of pace until you remember. You own one outfit. One. It's a tunic. Rough, itchy, woolen, and stitched by someone who might have been legally blind or just deeply bitter. Fashion is not seasonal. It's survival-based. You wear the same thing through summer heatwaves, winter frostbite, childbirth, funerals, and everything in between, until it basically evaporates off your body or fuses to your skin. Underwear? Optional. If you're lucky, you've got a thin linen layer under your tunic. If not, you're freeballing it under layers of medieval misery. And shoes? That's a fun concept. Most peasants don't have them. If you do, they're floppy leather footsacks with the structural integrity of wet cardboard. No soles, no cushioning, no support. Basically, your feet are one unfortunate stone away from full collapse. Most people just go barefoot, through mud, dung, splinters and medieval gravel, also known as shards of other people's broken hopes. Your clothes are stiff, not because they're starched, but because they're infused with months of sweat, smoke and field grease. There's no soap, no detergent, no laundromat. Washing clothes is a logistical nightmare that involves hauling water, boiling it over a fire, scrubbing with ashes or animal fat, and praying that the sun shines, which it probably won't. And if you're thinking at least your skin can breathe under all this, nope. Your skin is not okay. You're crawling with uninvited guests. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs treat your body like rent-free beachfront property. Everyone has them. Peasants, priests, nobles. You're scratching parts of yourself with a wooden spoon while making eye contact with the village elder. No one even flinches. Your scalp is a battlefield. Your armpits itch like they're plotting against you, and if you develop a rash, good luck. There are no ointments, no dermatologists, just the faint hope it's not something fatal. If it isn't, great. You'll just coexist with it for the next 6 months. So you're dressed now, drenched in wool, crawling with life and scratching like a dog in July. And it's time to get to work. You've wriggled into your one outfit, scratched every itch, and stumbled through mud that might technically be soup. Time to flash that charming medieval smile, right? No, because in the 1300s, opening your mouth is less about smiling and more about unleashing a horror show. Dental care doesn't exist. Toothbrushes, never heard of them. Toothpaste, not a thing. Floss? You're lucky if you can pick your teeth with a chicken bone. If you want to freshen up, your best bet is chewing on a twig or rinsing your mouth with vinegar. And that's if you're wealthy enough to own vinegar. Most people just let nature take its course, and nature, it turns out, is cruel. By your mid-20s, your mouth looks like something that crawled out of a tomb and asked for directions. Cavities are everywhere. Gums are swollen, teeth are cracked, and that charming shade of brown. Not coffee stains. That's decay. Straight up rot. Your breath smells like regret and yesterday's pottage, because parts of yesterday's pottage are still in your molars. Sugar is still rare and expensive, mainly enjoyed by nobles who use it to rot their teeth faster than peasants. And speaking of rot, get used to toothaches. They're like medieval Wi-Fi, always on, painfully slow, and completely unavoidable. Now what happens when your tooth goes from mild discomfort to screaming agony? You go see a barber. Yes, the same guy who trims your bowl cut is also in charge of yanking your molars out by firelight with an iron hook and zero anesthesia. One wrong move and you're unconscious, or worse, conscious the entire time. Antibiotics? Nowhere in sight. If that tooth gets infected, your jaw swells, your fever spikes, and suddenly a dental emergency turns into a one-way trip to the afterlife. Death by tooth. Congratulations. Romantic, isn't it? Also, good luck finding love. Halitosis is universal. No one's judging you for your breath. They just hope it doesn't knock them unconscious. Courtship is based on land, livestock, and dowries, not dental records. So yes, your mouth is a mess. And now that it's throbbing like a drum solo in your skull, it's time to go do the thing that will make all of this worse. Time to work. It's time for work. No commute, no office, no chance of a raise. Just your aching limbs, a splintery hoe, and the crushing knowledge that the only promotion available is death. If you're like 90% of the medieval population, you're a peasant, which is just a fancy way of saying unpaid labourer with fleas. You don't own the land you work. It belongs to a lord who lives in a drafty rock pile up the hill and wouldn't know your name if it was carved into his dinner plate. Your day starts at sunrise and ends when the sun packs up and leaves. No weekends, no breaks, just you, your calloused hands, and a growing suspicion that your spine is trying to file for divorce. If you're lucky, you've got an ox to help plough. If not, you are the ox. You dig trenches, haul water, sow seeds, pull weeds, and dodge rocks that are suspiciously shaped like medieval curses. You're bent over so much you could be mistaken for a mobile arch. Tired? No one cares. Sick? Drink warm beer and keep going. Injured? Hope you like gangrene. And if you're a woman, congrats. You get to do all that plus childcare, cooking, spinning wool, fetching water, cleaning everything with exactly zero cleaning products, and trying to ignore the fact that your husband's lice are staging a full-scale invasion. Kids? They start helping by age 5. No toys, no cartoons, just a rake the size of their arm and a dream of not dying from a sneeze. And if you're not a farmer, maybe you're a blacksmith, tanner or cooper. Sounds cool, right? Until you realise you spend your entire life in a smoke-filled shed, working with animal guts, molten metal or brain tanning fluid, which is exactly what it sounds like. Your pay, survival, your benefits, you get to keep your limbs, assuming nothing goes horribly wrong. Miss a day? That means you don't eat. Don't eat? That means you don't live. It's a flawless system, really, if you're into slow-motion collapse as a lifestyle. So you keep digging, keep sweating, and keep pretending that this is just your character arc. Because in the Middle Ages, your job isn't a profession, it's a sentence. You've survived breakfast, hygiene, and labour that would make a modern Jim cry. Now let's talk about the weather, because in the Middle Ages it's not a season, it's a punishment. Let's start with winter. You live in a one-room hut made of splintery wood and regret. The walls have more gaps than a half-baked excuse, and the roof is a patchwork of thatch and despair. Windows? Covered with cloth. Insulation? That's just a rumour monks argue about in Latin. You huddle near the hearth for warmth, if you can afford wood, which you probably can't. Why? Because collecting firewood might be illegal. Yes, you can be executed for picking the wrong stick from the wrong forest. Nature is not your friend, it's private property. You wrap yourself in your one damp wool tunic and pray your nose doesn't freeze off. Your hands are too numb to feel anything, your toes are basically decorative, and frostbite is just called bad luck. Now fast forward to summer. Sounds better? Absolutely not. Your house turns into an oven, but instead of baking cookies, it's slow roasting your sanity. There's no fan, no breeze, and definitely no deodorant. You sweat through every layer, but you can't take them off unless you want to be judged by society and the sun. And that sun? It's out for blood. Mosquitoes buzz like miniature demons, and the flies are having a 5-star buffet on your armpits. You're itchy, sunburned and melting into your own clothes, and you still have to work in the fields. Heat stroke? That's just a bad turn. Rain? It leaks through your roof. Drought? Your crops die. Wind? It rips the cloth off your window and drags half your life into a ditch. There's no cosy season in the Middle Ages. There's only too cold, too hot, too wet, and too late. And no matter the weather, your clothes still itch, your food still sucks, and your back still feels like it's made of gravel. Welcome to medieval climate control. The setting is always suffering. Feeling parched? Want to splash your face? Maybe rinse off the misery clinging to your soul? Too bad. In the Middle Ages, water is out to murder you. Let's start with drinking. That nearby stream looks clear, sparkly, almost poetic. But don't let the shimmer fool you. Upstream, someone just dumped a bucket of human waste into it. Or worse, a bloated animal carcass is bobbing around in it like a cursed floaty. Microbes, parasites, whole microbial kingdoms are thriving in that fresh water, which is why everyone drinks beer. Yes, beer, even toddlers. Not because people are fun drunks, but because beer is boiled. Boiled equals fewer things trying to dissolve your intestines. The alcohol is low, the safety is high, and nobody's thrilled about it. But at least it doesn't make your liver weep on contact like raw river water. Wealthy, you might drink wine, but only if you're comfortable being slightly buzzed all day and completely broke. Now let's talk bathing. Surely washing yourself is safe, right? Wrong. According to medieval science, bathing opens your pores, and that lets the bad stuff in. You read that right. Dirt equals protection. Scrubbing it off equals health hazard. The more filth you have, the more sealed you are against illness. Public bathhouses do exist, but they quickly turn into centres for gossip, sin, and unofficial extracurriculars. So naturally the church gets involved and shuts a bunch of them down. And even if you want to bathe at home, it's a full-scale production. You have to. 1. Fetch water from the well, dangerous. 2. Haul it home, painful. 3. Boil it, expensive. 4. Fill a wooden tub, leaky. 5. Use it before your cousin Rupert climbs in after a day of wrestling pigs, traumatizing. Rain barrels, full of bird poop, dead bugs, and probably a few curses. So whether it's going in your body or on your body, water is a medieval gamble. 1 sip, and you're sweating on a straw-stuffed mattress, praying to 6 different saints while you cough up your regrets. So next time you turn on a tap or take a hot shower, maybe light a candle for your ancestors who died trying to hydrate. So you drank the cursed water or stubbed your toe on something that's now purple and humming. You need a doctor. Except you're in the 14th century and a doctor is basically a well-intentioned torturer with a robe and a prayer. First, the diagnosis. Are you sneezing? Feverish? Bleeding from weird places? Clearly your humours are unbalanced. According to medieval medicine, your body is a delicate stew of 4 mystical fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If anything's wrong, it means your internal soup recipe is off. The solution? Let's drain you. Feeling warm? You have too much blood. Let's cut you open and pour some out. Or slap on some leeches and let them do the sipping. Yes, leeches. The original multitaskers. Gross, ancient, and wildly overrated. If your sadness feels terminal, you've got excess black bile. Treatment? Laxatives. Or maybe a priest. Or both. And if things are looking dire, the recommended cure is confession and last rites. Break a bone? You're in trouble. Surgeries performed with tools that look like gardening equipment, unwashed since the last patient screamed himself unconscious. There's no anesthesia, no antiseptic, and no sense of maybe we shouldn't. The idea of germs, not even a theory yet. Illness is either bad air or divine punishment for thinking too hard during church. Got a nasty stomach bug? That's God telling you to stop sinning. Better repent while curled up in a corner, clutching your abdomen and reconsidering every decision since breakfast. And if things really spiral, your local surgeon, probably the guy who trimmed your bangs last week, will yank out teeth, drain pus, or saw off limbs, all by candlelight and without flinching. If you miraculously survive, that's divine mercy. If you don't, the priest gets overtime and the leeches get promoted. So yes, medieval medicine isn't healthcare. It's a high-stakes guessing game where cure often means let's see what happens if we bleed you and rub you with a root. Hope you feel better. You've survived another day of agony and accidental surgery. Your reward? A steaming bowl of something. It might be food, or a test. Dinner in the Middle Ages is not a celebration, it's an act of endurance. Let's start with the basics. Nothing is fresh. Food preservation doesn't really exist. There are no fridges, no freezers. Your meat, if you have any, is aged in the worst possible way, left hanging in a corner, covered in flies, vaguely green and lightly seasoned with rat teeth. Bread is the cornerstone of the diet, but even that is a minefield. In lean times it's padded with bark, dirt or powdered desperation. Sometimes they even bake in clay to make it stretch. Other times it's rye season, and you get a bonus surprise. Ergot, a fungus that causes seizures, hallucinations, and death. It's like medieval LSD, but it ends with a burial. Vegetables? Only if they're in season, and they usually aren't. So you get turnips, lots of turnips, boiled, mashed, floating in your never-ending stew of sadness. That stew, your old frenemy pottage, is still going, by the way. It hasn't been cleaned or replaced since last month. New scraps just get dumped in. Fruit? If you're lucky, you'll see a shriveled apple in the fall. If not, you'll drink it. As wine. Fermented, of course. No sugar to sweeten it unless you're royalty. A single pinch of cinnamon could cost you your livelihood. Pepper? That's basically currency. Dairy? A gamble. Fresh milk turns into a biological weapon within hours. Cheese and butter might last longer, but they also might kill you. You eat them anyway, because there are no alternatives. Just boot leather and tears. And don't even think about hunting for your own meat. Wild animals belong to the Lord. That rabbit you caught? That's his rabbit. Get caught poaching and you could be fined, jailed, or executed. Yes, death over a squirrel. So as you sit by the fire, chewing a questionable stew and sipping weak ale, remember, every bite is a potential obituary. Bon appétit. The sun's gone down. You've eaten your grey stew, your joints feel like splintered wood, and you'd love to just rest. Too bad. Because in the Middle Ages, God is watching. So is your priest. And definitely your neighbour Agnes, who's basically a medieval surveillance camera with a direct line to the local clergy. Religion isn't just part of life. It is life. It runs your calendar, your social structure, your education, if you can read, your marriage, your afterlife plan, and probably your diet. Every bell from the church tells you what to do. Wake up, pray, stop eating meat, atone, beg for mercy, repeat. Miss Mass? That's a sin. Eat meat on the wrong day? Sin. Daydream about your neighbour's wife? Double sin with bonus flames. There are no shortcuts to salvation, just a long list of impossible rules enforced by fear and social pressure. You can't even read the Bible yourself. It's in Latin, which only monks, priests, and that one smug noble kid understand. So, whatever the priest says, that's God's official stance. If your crops fail, it's because you didn't pray hard enough. If your child dies, it's probably your fault. You should have lit more candles or confessed more thoroughly. And let's not forget tithes. You owe the church 1/10 of everything. Wheat, fork it over. Eggs, hand 'em in. Livestock, hope you didn't name them. Got nothing to give. Congratulations. You're spiritually broke and physically starving. Holidays? Technically holy days. You might get a break from field work, but only to fast, pray and reflect on your sinful nature. Celebrating joy for its own sake? Deeply suspicious. And questioning the church? Absolutely not. That's how you end up accused of heresy, tied to a post and set on fire while the crowd eats stale bread and watches. Heretics, witches, blasphemers, anyone too smart, too loud, or too different. They're fair game. So you do what everyone else does. You kneel. You chant. You try to look appropriately miserable, hoping that your suffering earns you a better seat in the afterlife. Because in medieval Europe, God might be merciful, but the church absolutely is not. If you thought being a medieval peasant was bad, try doing it while also being female. Same filth, same food, same fleas. Now add childbirth, 0 rights, constant judgment, and the lingering threat of being burned as a witch for having a strong opinion. Your life path is pre-written. Be born, marry young, have children, work until you collapse, and die quietly. Education? Not likely. Unless you're highborn and get packed off to a convent, your curriculum is butter churning, bread baking, and pretending your husband's lice aren't migrating into your side of the bed. Marriage isn't about love, it's a transaction. Livestock, land, and alliances. You could be promised to someone at 12, married at 14, and pregnant by next week. Your opinion? Irrelevant. Once married, you're legally his property. Your job: produce children, serve meals, obey silently, and definitely don't get caught rolling your eyes. Complain too much and you might get labelled a nag. Be unmarried and independent. you're unnatural. Know a little about herbs? Witch. And here's the real horror show. Childbirth. It's not just painful, it's deadly. No doctors, no sterile tools, no pain relief. You scream into a straw-stuffed pillow while hoping your midwife isn't guessing. Many women survive, many don't, and if you do, congrats. You now have a screaming newborn in a flea-ridden hut and still need to finish mending your husband's socks and slopping the pigs. If you're widowed, you're vulnerable. If you're childless, you're cursed. If you're outspoken, you're dangerous. That's the trifecta of suspicion. Even in the church, supposedly the refuge for souls, women are second class. Nuns follow strict rules, rarely speak, and live behind walls while men preach, rule, and interpret scripture. So if you're a woman in the Middle Ages, you're expected to work, obey, bleed, and smile through it all, with no say, no break, and no escape. Because even in an age where everyone suffers, women are expected to suffer politely. So far you've endured the fleas, the pottage, the freezing nights, and a religious guilt complex the size of a cathedral. But now it's time for the real spice of medieval life. Violence. And not the random kind. We're talking normalised, scheduled, often cheered for violence, like Game of Thrones with worse dental hygiene. Start small, you steal a loaf of bread, maybe you're starving, maybe you just hate turnips, doesn't matter. If caught, you could lose a hand. Caught gossiping, enjoy the scold's bridle, a metal muzzle clamped onto your face with a mouthpiece to stop you from talking. Gossip too much, and they might just add public humiliation and a bucket of rotten vegetables. Accused of lying? Time for a tongue piercing with an iron spike. Now say you're charged with something serious, witchcraft, heresy, or just being kind of annoying during Lent. There's no innocent until proven guilty. There's prove you're innocent by surviving torture. It's called trial by ordeal, and yes, it's every bit as dumb as it sounds. One version involves dunking your hand into boiling water to retrieve a rock. If it doesn't blister horribly in 3 days, congrats. You're innocent, and probably an alien. Another test? You get thrown into a river. Sink equals innocent and dead. Float equals guilty. Either way, someone's lighting a bonfire. Public executions? Absolute crowd pleasers. Hangings, beheadings, burnings at the stake. Villagers show up early and bring snacks. It's community theatre with more screaming. Domestic violence? Totally legal and even expected. A husband disciplining his wife or kids was considered part of family life. Street fights happen constantly. Disrespect the wrong knight or step on the wrong noble's robe and you might get clubbed in front of the market. And war? Always simmering. Raids, crusades, land feuds. There's always someone marching off to stab someone else for glory, vengeance, or boredom. This isn't a world where violence means something's gone wrong. Violence is the system. It enforces the rules, delivers the law, entertains the masses, and keeps everyone just scared enough to stay in line. So walk softly, keep your eyes down, and don't trust anyone with a club, especially if they also own a scale and call themselves a judge. If you've made it this far, congratulations. You've survived parasites, pottage, punishment, and possibly a plague or two, but don't get too comfortable, because in the Middle Ages, death isn't just waiting, it's looming. Let's talk life expectancy. The average hovers somewhere between 30 and 40, and that's with the generous help of math. Nearly half of all kids die before age 5. If you survive that, you're already a local legend. Adults start breaking down early. By your mid-20s, your back sounds like a wagon wheel on gravel. Your teeth are missing or mutinous, and you're limping on a leg that's been mildly infected since harvest season. If you're a woman, childbirth is basically a coin toss, and the coin is on fire. No prenatal care, no antiseptics, no pain relief. Just you, a midwife, and hope. And if things go sideways, so do you. If you're a man, your death options include farming accident, infected blister, bar fight, crusade injury, or stepped on a rusty nail while collecting firewood illegally. Even going to the market is risky. Bandits, tax collectors, or a neighbour with unresolved goat disputes might be waiting. There's plague, of course. The Black Death is the headliner, but there are plenty of other diseases too. Dysentery, typhoid, smallpox, all of them happy to kill you before your next grey bowl of stew. And famine? That's just the slow-motion version of dying. One bad harvest and your village starves while praying for divine forgiveness and extra turnips. Funerals? If you're lucky, someone says a prayer before dumping you in a shallow grave. No embalming, no headstone, just earth, maybe a cross, and the vague hope your soul makes it somewhere nicer. There is no retirement, no pension, no golden years. You work until your body gives out, and then you stop showing up. And that is your exit. So next time you're sipping filtered water, sitting on a soft mattress under a roof that doesn't leak, maybe say a quiet thanks for plumbing, for medicine, for heat, and for ancestors who battled lice, leeches, and lead poisoning, so you could wear clean socks and Google your symptoms instead of confessing them to a priest. So after surviving one full medieval day, maybe you're still thinking, well, at least it was a simpler time. Let's clear that up. It wasn't simple, it was relentless. Hollywood and fairy tales want you to think of gallant knights, noble quests, and candlelit feasts. But for most people, there were no ballads, just back pain, dirt, and silent suffering. Hierarchy ruled everything. Born poor, you die poor. Born rich, you die slightly cleaner, but still very much at risk of dying from soup-related bacteria or your cousin's political betrayal. And even the nobles weren't living the dream. Their castles were cold, full of smoke, and constantly under threat of siege or syphilis. Their marriages were business deals. Their food was elaborate, sure, but also crawling with disease and so overseasoned it could knock out your molars. The good old days weren't good. They weren't even days for many people, just grey blurs of labour and obligation, punctuated by illness, superstition, and the sound of something dying nearby. Romanticised history is polished. Real history is mud, blood, and the bitter taste of knowing your life's peak accomplishment might be not dying of bread. But here's the twist. Even in all this chaos, the cold, the filth, the pain, people still found ways to live. Not just survive, live. They laughed, sang, fell in love under leaking roofs. They danced on feast days, told stories by firelight, and carved tiny symbols into wood and stone trying to say, I was here. They carved hope out of misery. Mothers held their children close. Friends shared crusts of bread when they could have kept them. People drew pictures on church walls, sewed colour into clothes, and made music with bones and string and breath. They had no antibiotics, no Wi-Fi, no heating. But they still built cathedrals, not because it made sense, but because something in them believed in more. That spark, that stubborn laugh in the face of death sing anyway spirit, it's still in us. So when you climb into a clean bed tonight, under a roof that doesn't drip with running water, indoor plumbing, and a toothbrush within arm's reach, you're not just lucky. You're living proof of how far we've come. And somewhere deep in the dusty corners of history, a medieval soul would be amazed to see what you have. Forget everything you know about childhood. In the Middle Ages, being a kid wasn't a phase. It was a countdown. You were born, hopefully survived the first few years, and then got put to work. Toys? If you're lucky, you get a stick, maybe a rock, maybe both if you're upper middle peasant. There's no school unless you're noble or cloistered in a monastery. Most kids can't read, and that's not a failure, it's the norm. What they can do by age 5 is rake, carry water, herd animals, or follow their parents into the fields for a 10-hour day. There's no such thing as too young. If you can walk, you can work. If you can't work, you'd better be quiet and not get in the way. Or worse, attract attention during church and get scolded into oblivion. Play? It happens, but between chores and under the weight of fear of illness, hunger, punishment, a scraped knee could kill you, a cough could take your siblings one by one. But despite all that, kids still were kids. They laughed. They played games with bones, shouted songs they half remembered, and clung to tiny scraps of joy wherever they found them. Childhood wasn't safe or gentle, but it existed. In snatched moments, in stolen seconds. In this world, innocence wasn't protected. It had to protect itself. Close your eyes. Listen. What do you hear? Not silence. Not even close. The Middle Ages were loud, just in a completely different frequency than we're used to. There's the constant clang of blacksmiths, the creak of wooden wheels over cobblestone, the bleating of goats, chickens squawking, dogs barking, babies crying, always crying. You hear the church bells again and again, marking time, calling prayers, ringing for the dead. You hear singing, monks chanting in Latin, peasants singing in the fields, lullabies that barely hold together through cracked voices and frostbitten lips. There's shouting, arguing, screaming, sometimes pain, sometimes laughter, sometimes both. Even in the countryside, quiet is never truly quiet. It's the sound of wind through wooden beams, of rain on thatch, of whispered gossip around fires. And underneath it all there's the human hum, breathing, murmuring, surviving. The Middle Ages weren't silent or still. They pulsed with noise, with life, with people just trying to be heard. So after the fleas, the fever, the firewood fines and spiritual anxiety, what remains of the people who lived through it all? A lot more than you think. They left behind cathedrals that still scrape the sky, manuscripts inked by candlelight with aching hands and unwavering purpose, songs that survived centuries of silence, names carved into tombstones and scribbled into forgotten margins. But most of all, they left behind us. Their struggles shaped our world, their failures and triumphs, their plagues and prayers, their grit and grief. They planted the seeds of everything we now call modern: science, literature, language, law. Their world was full of pain, but also wonder. They looked up at the stars with no telescope and still dreamed. They suffered through endless winters and still believed in spring. And though they didn't know our names or our technology or the comfort of a warm shower, they pushed forward anyway. Because that's the legacy of humanity. Keep going, keep building, keep singing, even when your voice shakes and the night is cold. So here we are, 20 chapters of dirt, disease, despair, and humanity. You've walked through muddy fields, felt hunger gnaw, watched loved ones slip away. You've been punished, prayed over, and pushed to the edge by a world that barely noticed whether you lived or died. And yet, the Middle Ages weren't just some grim pit stop in history. They shaped everything. That aching push for survival, it became invention. That longing for meaning, it gave rise to art, to science, to stories we still tell. The people of the Middle Ages laid the crooked, splintery foundation that the modern world now stands on. They remind us of something easy to forget. Humans can suffer immensely and still build. They can hurt and still sing. They can be trapped in superstition, rot and cruelty, and still reach for something better. Understanding where we came from, not the romanticised version, but the real, raw, uncomfortable truth, helps us recognise how much has changed and how much still hasn't. We still wrestle with injustice, with sickness, with systems that crush instead of care. But we also carry that same spark, the one that pushed a peasant to carve a symbol into a stone, or a midwife to comfort someone when there was no comfort left to give. So the Middle Ages, they're not just history, they're a mirror, cracked, brutal and honest, showing us where we came from, and daring us to keep going. Because if they could survive that, we can survive this. Let's say you, right now, got zapped back to the year 1325. No warning, no suitcase. Just you, your modern brain, and whatever's in your pockets. Here's what happens next. First, panic. The smell hits you like a freight train made of manure and old soup. Your clothes scream foreign, your accent makes no sense, and your phone, once your sacred portal to all knowledge, is now just a fancy brick you can't even charge. People stare, then they get suspicious, then they get really suspicious. You don't know the local dialect, you can't name the lord, you look clean, your teeth are suspiciously white, and you're asking weird questions like, where's the doctor? Or, is this chicken free range? If you're lucky, they decide you're just odd. If you're not lucky, they think you're a witch, a demon, or a French spy, which in many regions is just as bad. At best, you're dragged to church for cleansing. At worst, you're put on trial for being weird. Even if you somehow blend in, you don't know how to farm, you don't know how to sew, butcher, tan leather, build with wattle and daub, or tell the time by sun. You can't even make beer, which means you can't even drink safely. You miss caffeine within 12 hours, you miss toothpaste by nightfall, and within 48 hours, you're praying to any saint who'll listen for Wi-Fi and ibuprofen. And the worst part, all your advanced knowledge is mostly useless. You know germ theory. Great. You have no way to prove it. You know antibiotics exist. Awesome. You can't make them. You can't build a generator or even explain how one works beyond magnets? The brutal truth? You'd be lucky to last a week. More likely you'd be dead, imprisoned or permanently confused, with fleas. So next time someone says, I was born in the wrong era, ask them, can you make bread from scratch, ride a horse into a thunderstorm and survive dysentery without crying? If not, maybe, just maybe, this era's not so bad after all. When we think of heroes from the Middle Ages, we picture knights in shining armour, riding majestically into battle while choirs of Gregorian monks sing in the background. But let's be real, most of the real heroes weren't wearing metal. They were too busy keeping people alive, fed and sane. Let's talk about midwives. These women delivered babies in the most dangerous conditions imaginable, without training manuals, sterile gloves or modern medicine. They learned by experience, by word of mouth, and by absolute necessity. They held the hands of women in pain, comforted grieving mothers, and worked long into the night by candlelight. And often they weren't thanked, just tolerated until the next emergency. Then there were the monks and scribes hunched over desks in freezing rooms, copying books by hand, letter by painstaking letter. They preserved science, history and poetry, while their world burned, bled, and groaned outside monastery walls. If you can read this now, it's partly because they chose to spend decades writing things down instead of giving up. Don't forget the healers and herbalists, many of them women, who tended wounds, brewed potions, and tried to balance humours with the knowledge passed down through generations. Some were revered, others were branded witches. Either way, they saved lives while risking their own. Even the village blacksmith deserves credit. Without him, there's no plough, no tools, no horseshoes, no nails to hold up your roof. Every time something broke, which was often, he fixed it. He was your mechanic, repairman, welder, and local legend, all in one soot-covered package. And then there were the parents, exhausted, overworked, half-starved, who still sang lullabies to their children at night. The ones who taught their kids to walk, to plant, to survive. Who buried one child and still got up the next day to protect the others. Quiet heroes, every single one. The people who kept the world turning weren't noble, rich, or powerful. They were ordinary, invisible, and absolutely essential. So remember, history may be written by the winners, but it was built by the tired. So you've spent some quality time in 1325. You're starving, itchy, possibly accused of witchcraft, and trying not to drink the water. But what really gets to you, what breaks you down after a few days, isn't the pottage or the parasites. It's the little things. You miss privacy. In the Middle Ages, you're never alone. Ever. You sleep next to your siblings, your parents, the family goat, and a colony of lice that's beginning to unionize. There are no walls, no locked doors, no headphones, no do not disturb. Want to cry in peace? Too bad. Want to think in silence? Nope. Every thought you have is shared with a dozen other people, whether you like it or not. You miss light, modern light. Not firelight, not a sputtering candle that smells like sheep fat, but the warm, quiet hum of a lamp you can flip on without praying for dry tinder and good wind. You miss being able to read at night without risking a fire or blindness. You miss choices. Today you can change careers, move cities, start over. In 1325, you are who you were born as. Your father's a farmer, so are you. Your mother's a servant, so are you. Your life is pre-written, and tearing up the script gets you excommunicated, or worse. You miss boredom. In the modern world, boredom is an inconvenience. In the Middle Ages, it's a luxury. If you're bored, it means you're not working, bleeding, freezing, or burying someone. It means you have time, and no one in 1325 has time. You miss soft things, socks, blankets, pillows that don't crunch, toilet paper, clean shirts. You miss the gentle stuff you never noticed until you were scraping yourself clean with straw and sleeping on what might be a dead squirrel. But the biggest shock? You miss being nobody. In your world, anonymity is normal. In theirs, everything you do is seen, judged, and talked about. There is no fading into the crowd. Everyone knows who you are, who your parents were, who your grandparents were, and what you did last Thursday behind the barn. In the end, what breaks you isn't the filth or the hunger. It's the sheer weight of constant discomfort, scrutiny, and struggle. And suddenly, modern life doesn't look so boring anymore. Just when you thought things couldn't get worse, spoiler, they absolutely can. Because in the Middle Ages, you don't just fear hunger, punishment, or the vague threat of frostbite. You fear plague. Real, fast, body-melting plague. And not just the Black Death, though that one gets the headlines. Plagues were like bad weather or taxes. They came often, hit hard, and didn't care if you were already having a rough year. The bubonic plague? That's the headliner. It rolls into town in 1347 like the worst concert tour in history, leaving piles of bodies and a permanent smell of terror. No one understands it. No one can stop it, and everyone's got a theory. Bad air, angry stars, Jews poisoning wells, sin, too much dancing, not enough prayer. Basically, anything but germs. You notice something's wrong when your neighbour develops golf ball-sized lumps under his arms and starts leaking blood from everywhere. Then someone dies, then 10, then 50, then the priest stops showing up because he's dead too. Doctors wear beaked masks stuffed with herbs. They look like deranged bird people and are just as useful. Treatments include bloodletting, burning incense, and rubbing onions on the boils. Yes, onions. Not because it works, because it's what they had. And also, possibly because everyone gave up. You can't flee the city fast enough, but guess what? You take the plague with you. Congratulations, you've become a medieval biological weapon. Burial? If you're lucky, a quick shovel in a mass grave. If not, you rot where you fall. Bells toll endlessly. The smell becomes part of the air. Entire villages vanish. The world feels like it's ending, because for many it does. And yet people still go on. They pray louder, marry faster, eat what they can, dance harder, because tomorrow is a very big question mark. So if you thought pandemic life in the modern world was hard, imagine living it with no hospitals, no science, and a government response that basically amounts to repent harder. In the 14th century, when death knocks, it kicks the door in. So you've worked until your hands are numb, buried half your family, and survived a pottage dinner with only mild hallucinations. You're exhausted, itchy, possibly cursed, and yet you crave fun. Well, strap in, because medieval entertainment is less Netflix and chill and more barefoot interpretive trauma. Let's start with games, not video games, not board games. We're talking stickball, pig bladder kickball. Yes, it's literally a pig bladder, and whatever activity can distract you from the fact that you have 12 lice bites on your face. Children might roll hoops with sticks, adults might gamble with dice made from bones, and no one wins. Ever. Because even when you win, someone accuses you of witchcraft. Now, music. There are minstrels if you're lucky, and if you're rich enough to afford them. Otherwise, entertainment is Uncle Bert playing a cracked lute and singing off-key while someone claps with the rhythm of a drunken goat. If you're in church, there's Gregorian chant. It's beautiful. Also soul-crushingly slow. Dancing? Yes, but prepare for judgment. Too lively and it's sinful. Too slow and it's suspicious. So you sway awkwardly in wool tunics while someone beats a drum made from animal hide and depression. Let's talk about festivals. On holy days, which to be fair are the only excuse to not be actively dying in a field, you get a few hours of fun. This includes puppet shows, deeply unsettling, acrobats, injured, and mystery plays where villagers reenact Bible stories with the emotional subtlety of a hammer. And then there's the public execution, aka the Super Bowl of medieval entertainment. Everyone gathers, kids in tow, snacks in hand, to watch someone get hanged, drawn, or occasionally flambéed for the crime of existing slightly wrong. It's the highlight of the season. People write songs about it. No, really. And let's not forget the jesters, medieval stand-up comedians who juggled, danced and mocked nobles just enough to avoid getting beheaded. They're the only ones laughing. Everyone else is too tired. So yes, the Middle Ages had entertainment, but it wasn't escapism, it was survival theatre. Grim, gritty, and occasionally hilarious in a laugh or cry kind of way. Because if life is pain, at least you can hum while it hurts. You might think medieval people didn't keep pets, but they absolutely did. In the same way you might keep a cough or a stubborn rash, meaning you don't ask for them, they just happen. Let's start with dogs. If you're a noble, you've got sleek hunting hounds with names like Valor and Gisber. They sleep on straw near your feet and sometimes get fed before your servants. If you're a peasant, your dog is mostly ribs and fleas, and its name is probably just Dog. It guards the hut, barks at shadows, and occasionally eats things you don't want to think about. Cats? Now there's a political topic. Some folks love them, for killing rats mostly. Others, they see cats as shape-shifting devil minions. Black cat crosses your path? That's a bad harvest and 3 dead relatives minimum. During outbreaks of superstition, cats were killed en masse, which ironically led to more rats, which led to more plague, which led to more dying. Nice work, medieval logic. Speaking of rats, let's talk pests. You don't have them, you host them. Fleas, lice and mice are permanent tenants in your home, your clothes, and probably your hair. You scratch in your sleep, you scratch at church, and at a certain point scratching becomes your new love language. Chickens? Oh, you have chickens. They live in your one-room hut. They peck at your bread, your baby, and your dignity. At least they give eggs, occasionally, unless they're sick, or dead, or cursed. Then there are pigs, the medieval version of a garbage disposal with tusks. They eat anything, scraps, rot, possibly your neighbour's toe if he passes out near the sty. Pigs roam the village like pink, grunting anarchists, and no one can stop them. Also, their fat is used for soap. So yes, when you bathe once a year it's with lard. Horses? Only if you're rich. If you're not, congratulations, you are the horse. And let's not forget plague-carrying rodents, parasite-riddled birds, and the occasional feral dog pack that controls the night like medieval street gangs. If one starts howling, someone's about to die. Maybe you. The bottom line, in 1325 animals are everywhere. In your home, your food, your bed, your bloodstream. Some are friends, most are problems, all are suspects. So yes, you love your dog, fear your cat, milk your goat, and sleep next to chickens. And maybe, just maybe, if you're lucky, they'll keep the rats at bay, and only give you one disease at a time. Believe it or not, medieval folks had social lives, not in the brunch and bottomless mimosas sense, more like communal suffering and whispered scandals between goat-milking shifts. Your village is your world. It's small, muddy, loud, and everyone knows everything about everyone. Privacy? That's not a concept. It's a sin against the communal nosiness that holds society together. Your neighbours know when you sneeze. They know when your turnip patch underperforms. They know how many times you really went to confession last month. Gossip is the national pastime. The medieval version of social media is standing near the well, clutching a bucket and saying, "Did you hear what Agnes said about the miller's apprentice?" It's thrilling, it's dangerous, and it's the only entertainment that doesn't require firewood. But beware, gossip too much and you might get hit with the scold's bridle, a metal head cage for women who talk too freely, which in medieval terms could mean spoke with confidence, or had an opinion about soup. Still, community events happen. Feast days are a big deal. Music, dancing, awkward flirting and boiled food in quantities that briefly distract you from your emotional trauma. Sometimes there are games. Sometimes there are fights. Sometimes the church burns something, or someone, and everyone watches. Weddings are mostly about alliances, but hey, there's wine. People get rowdy. The food's slightly less terrifying. You might even sneak a smile if the bread isn't green. Funerals? Weirdly social. Death is everywhere, so people turn grief into ritual. Mourning clothes, candlelit processions, and long whispered speculations about whether the deceased was cursed or just clumsy near livestock. Want to make friends? Be useful? Share bread? Help with harvest? Don't curse the priest out loud, and for the love of all that's holy, don't be too clean. That's suspicious. Want to make enemies? Talk too much. Heal someone's rash with herbs. Get caught reading. Basically, Exist slightly outside the accepted groove and you'll have the whole village watching you like you're about to sprout horns. But somehow in all this filth and fear and festering, people still come together. They laugh, they argue, they marry, they dance like no one's judging, even though everyone is judging. Because even in the Middle Ages, humans crave connection and gossip, mostly gossip. You've heard about the sad pottage, the sawdust bread, the maybe it's meat stew. But now we need to address a darker truth. Medieval cuisine wasn't just bad, it was criminal. Let's start with recipes, and I use that word generously. Medieval cooking isn't measured in cups and teaspoons. It's more like throw it in, chant something, hope for a miracle. If a dish ends in survival, it's considered a win. Spices, as mentioned before, are rarer than affection from your noble overlord. Pepper, worth more than gold. Cinnamon, a myth. Nutmeg, might as well ask for dragon eggs. So instead of flavour, people lean on the old reliable trio. Salt, if you're rich. Smoke, from the fire you're cooking on, and vague disappointment. Now let's talk about food storage, or the complete lack thereof. No fridge, no Tupperware. You want leftovers? They're already walking away on their own. People preserve meat by hanging it in cool places, which usually means next to the latrine, under a thatched roof, and above a nest of very motivated rats. And cooking tools? Try a pot, just one. Maybe a knife. That's it. No forks yet. Forks are still considered suspicious little pitchforks of Satan. People eat with knives, fingers, or stale bread used as a plate, also called a trencher, which often doubles as dessert. Yes, they eat the plate. Now brace yourself. Eggs were seasonal. Seasonal, as in not always available. Chickens didn't lay year-round, and sometimes they just stopped for reasons no one understood. So you'd trade eggs like currency, or hoard them like relics. Crack one open and find it's half-formed. That's just extra protein. Allegedly. Milk? A race against time. Fresh for 11 minutes, then it turns into yogurt, then cheese, then an entity that legally counts as a threat. Most people drank it slightly sour and called it a blessing. They were lying. And then there's the true war crime. Ale stew porridge bread mash. A real dish that might include all those things at once. Why? Because nothing can go to waste, not even the bad ideas. Let's not forget bread mould, specifically ergot. That's the fungus that grows on rye and causes convulsions, paranoia and hallucinations so intense people thought they were turning into wolves. Medieval food, now with bonus werewolf panic. Bottom line, eating in the Middle Ages wasn't about taste. It was about not dying immediately. You ate to survive. Barely. You cooked with hope. You chewed with suspicion. And you swallowed with prayer. Because every meal was a gamble. And the house always wins. Fashion in the Middle Ages wasn't about looking good. It was about not freezing to death, or getting fined, or excommunicated for indecent elbows. Let's start with the peasants, which statistically speaking means you. Your wardrobe consists of one tunic, one cloak, if you're rich in luck or poor in judgment, one pair of foot wraps maybe, and enough lice to qualify as livestock. Your tunic is made of wool. It is scratchy. It is heavy. It is never clean. You wear it to work, to sleep, to weddings, to funerals, and eventually to your grave. By then, it's basically part of your body. Got a hole in it? Sew it shut with twine. No one's judging, because they also look like they wrestled a sheep and lost. Now underwear. If you're lucky, linen. If you're unlucky, nothing. Going commando wasn't a lifestyle. It was the default. Shoes? If you're barefoot, you're normal. If you have shoes, they're leather flaps loosely tied together and wetter than your hopes. Step on a sharp rock, that's your new personality. And let's not forget sumptuary laws. legal fashion rules designed to make sure you never accidentally look richer than you are. Want to wear purple? Nope. That's royalty only. Want fur? Sorry, only for people with enough money to pay the church to look the other way. Violating dress codes could get you fined, whipped, or at minimum scowled at by 10 smug friars. Nobles, of course, dress like insecure peacocks. Women are trussed into tight bodices and head cones long enough to receive radio signals. Men wear tights, long tunics, pointy shoes, so long they have to tie them to their knees, and hats that look like cursed muffins. You're not dressed unless you look like an uncomfortable chess piece. Also, everything catches fire. Wool, it smoulders. Linen, toast. Those long sleeves and floor-length gowns are basically medieval tinderboxes. Cooking near a hearth in a full skirt, you've entered the lottery of spontaneous combustion. And cleanliness, your clothes get aired out. Translation, hung over smoke and prayed over. They smell like a wet dog in a chimney, which is still better than you smell. Fashion isn't glamorous, it's survival, social control and seasonal chafing. But hey, at least your tunic hides the flea bites. And maybe, just maybe, if you tie your shoes tight, pin your hood right, and keep your elbows covered, you'll survive another church service without a scandal. Let's take a quick peek into the average medieval brain. A tangled mess of superstition, faith, fear, and a deep, abiding suspicion of everything. To live in the Middle Ages was to believe in things you couldn't see, couldn't explain, and could definitely be killed for questioning. First and foremost, God. Not the warm, gentle kind, the vengeful, plague-sending, famine-approving, lightning-bolt-wielding version who's mad because you skipped morning prayer and maybe looked at Brother Thomas sideways during Mass. Everything, disease, war, spoiled bread, was seen as punishment for sin, and spoiler, everyone was always sinning. Then came the devil, who lurked in shadows, pigs, storms, and that weird mole on your back. People genuinely believed Satan was just hanging out in your cottage, waiting for you to sneeze without crossing yourself. Magic? Absolutely real, but dangerously ambiguous. Healing herbs, witchcraft, sudden rainstorm, a veraslow. Your goat died mysteriously. Definitely a neighbour's curse. Your baby was born with a birthmark. Time to panic. Might be the devil's autograph. The four humours ruled medicine and mood: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Too much of one? You were cranky. Too little? You were dead. Doctors diagnosed with charts and astrology, and if that failed, they'd just bleed you and call it divine balance. People believed in fairies, forest spirits, and saints who could cure you if you prayed hard enough, or smote you if you didn't kneel enthusiastically. Relics, like a toenail from Saint, somebody, or a splinter from the true cross, were collected like medieval Pokemon. You believed they had power, even if they were 100% fakes. Also, omens were everywhere. A two-headed calf, the end is near, a comet, war is coming, a sneeze at the wrong time, better make a will, birds flew the wrong direction, cursed. You dreamed of fire, double cursed. Woke up feeling off, cursed, and probably contagious. There was no separation between natural and supernatural. Your cow didn't give milk. That was theology. Your kid had a fever, a demon, or your sins, or both. You got lucky with your harvest, must have lit the right candle or bribed the right saint. Critical thinking wasn't banned, it just got you accused of heresy. The medieval world didn't operate on facts, it ran on fear, folklore and faith, all wrapped in a worldview that assumed life was a test, the afterlife was the prize, and any moment of happiness was probably a trap set by Satan. So yes, the medieval mindset was complex, devout, imaginative, terrified, but also, in its own way, deeply human. They didn't have science, they had stories, and sometimes stories were all they needed to keep going. Dear medieval you don't know me. I live in the future, a place with glowing screens, sky metal birds, and water that appears from walls like magic. I write this while sitting on something soft, sipping coffee that didn't kill me, with socks that aren't crusted with frost and foot sweat. And I want to say, thank you. You didn't have antibiotics, heat, or dental plans. You didn't have rights, comfort, or even breathable underwear. You lived in a world that tried to kill you every day, and still you kept going. You built cathedrals with aching hands. You turned superstition into ritual, despair into music, and mud into meaning. You buried your children and still woke up the next day to bake bread. You endured winter with nothing but a tunic and sheer spite. You danced. You loved. You carved stories into stone because you wanted someone to remember you were here. Well, we remember. You couldn't imagine a world with airplanes, vaccines, or the internet. You couldn't picture cities lit by electricity or machines that cured disease. You couldn't dream of choosing who you married, voting, retiring, or even having time to rest. But here we are, in that world. Because you didn't give up. Because you clawed and crawled and bled your way through centuries so we could have the luxury of convenience, safety, and Googling weird rash at 2 a.m. We still get things wrong. A lot. There's still suffering. Still injustice. Still people without homes or food or voices. But we also have the power to change it. To build better. Because you built the bones of everything. You were strong when it was hardest. You made joy in the dark. You didn't just survive the Middle Ages. You passed the torch through fire and filth so someone else could carry it farther. And now we carry it. So this is for you. The nameless, the bitten, the hungry, the hopeful. The woman who stitched one more cloak before dying in childbirth. The farmer who planted despite the frost. The child who sang in a language lost to time. The monk who lit one more candle before the ink froze in his pen. We remember you. We're still here because you were. With love, awe, and running water, the future.